By the time he was 30, he had conquered more of the known world than any human being before him, and he did it before most men today finish building a career. This is the story of the boy who refused to believe in limits, Alexander the Great. In 356 BC, a boy was born in a small mountain kingdom that most of the civilized world barely acknowledged. By the time he was 16, he had commanded an army. By 20, he was king. By 25, he had shattered the largest empire on earth. And by 32, he had marched further than any Greek had ever imagined possible, and died without ever losing a single battle. His name was Alexander, and history would know him by one more word: great. This is the story of how a boy from a kingdom nobody feared became the man an entire world couldn't stop. Macedon, in the north of Greece, was considered a backwater, rough, half-civilized in the eyes of Athens and Sparta. But its king, Philip II, was reshaping it into the most feared military power in the Greek world, and his son would inherit both his ambition and his enemies. Alexander's mother, Olympias, believed her son was no ordinary child. She claimed he was descended from the hero Achilles, and that the god Zeus himself had a hand in his birth. Whether or not Alexander believed it, he grew up utterly convinced that he was destined for something extraordinary. That conviction showed itself early. At just 12 years old, Alexander stood before a wild, powerful horse that no man in his father's court could tame. Bucephalus reared, kicked, and threw off every rider who dared approach. Alexander noticed something no one else had. The horse was afraid of its own shadow. He simply turned the animal to face the sun and calmly climbed on. His father Philip reportedly wept with pride, telling him, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small for you." He had no idea how right he was. Philip wanted his son to be more than just a warrior. He wanted him to be unstoppable in every sense. So he hired the greatest mind in the ancient world to shape Alexander. Aristotle, the philosopher who would go on to influence nearly every field of Western thought, spent years personally tutoring the young prince in a secluded academy carved into the hills of Macedon. Alexander studied medicine, philosophy, logic, and literature. He reportedly slept with a copy of Homer's Iliad under his pillow, obsessed with the glory of Achilles. This mattered more than most people realize. Alexander wasn't just being trained to swing a sword. He was being trained to think like a ruler of nations he hadn't even conquered yet, to understand different cultures, different governments, different ways of seeing the world. It's a strange, almost unbelievable fact of history. One of the greatest military conquerors who ever lived was educated by one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived. That combination, brute ambition fused with a genuinely curious, disciplined mind, would define everything that came next. In 336 BC, everything changed in an instant. King Philip was assassinated at his own daughter's wedding, stabbed by one of his own bodyguards in front of a stadium full of witnesses. Alexander was 20 years old. Overnight, he inherited a kingdom, an army, and a long list of enemies who assumed a 20-year-old would be easy to overthrow, only to be proven catastrophically wrong. Alexander moved with brutal speed and precision, crushing rebellions in Greece before his rivals could even organize. When the city of Thebes rose against him, he made an example so severe, destroying the city almost entirely, that no other Greek city dared challenge him again. Within 2 years, the boy who had once calmed a wild horse had secured total control over Greece itself. Now he turned his eyes east, toward the largest empire the world had ever known: Persia. Everyone told him it was impossible. Persia's army outnumbered his by staggering margins. He crossed into Asia anyway, with roughly 40,000 soldiers, against an empire that could field hundreds of thousands. At the Granicus River, Alexander faced his first true test against Persia, and nearly died doing it, taking a sword blow to the helmet that would have killed most men. He won anyway, shattering the Persian frontier forces in his very first major battle on Asian soil. Then came the city of Gordium, home to a knot so impossibly tangled that legend promised whoever untied it would rule all of Asia. Scholars and kings had failed for generations. Alexander looked at it for a moment, then drew his sword and cut it in half. Whether myth or truth, the story spread like wildfire through his army and beyond. This was not a man who respected impossible problems. He simply removed them. At Issus, in 333 BC, Alexander faced the Persian king Darius III himself, commanding a force many times the size of his own. Through sheer tactical brilliance, striking directly at Darius's position rather than engaging the full army head-on, Alexander broke the Persian lines completely. Darius fled the battlefield, abandoning his own mother, wife, and children to Alexander's mercy. Alexander, in a move that stunned both sides, treated the captured Persian royal family with remarkable respect. He was already thinking beyond conquest. He was thinking about what came after. Not every victory came easily. The island fortress city of Tyre believed itself untouchable, surrounded entirely by sea, its walls rising directly from the water. Alexander refused to accept that any city was untouchable. For 7 months, his engineers built a massive stone causeway straight across the ocean toward Tyre's walls, an engineering feat almost as audacious as the siege itself. When the city finally fell, it sent an unmistakable message across the entire region. There was no fortress Alexander could not break. From there, he marched into Egypt, and the Egyptians, who despised their Persian rulers, welcomed him instead as a liberator. They crowned him pharaoh. On the Egyptian coast, Alexander founded a city that would carry his name for the next 2,000 years, Alexandria. It would go on to become one of the greatest centers of learning the ancient world ever produced. Deep in the Egyptian desert, Alexander made a pilgrimage to a remote oracle at Siwa. What was said inside that temple, no one fully knows. But Alexander emerged believing, more firmly than ever, that he was the son of a god. In 331 BC, Darius assembled what may have been the largest army ever gathered in the ancient world, determined to end Alexander once and for all at a place called Gaugamela. Ancient sources claim Persian numbers reaching into the hundreds of thousands, facing an exhausted Macedonian force a fraction of that size. By every conventional measure, Alexander should have lost. Instead, using terrain, discipline, and a tactical maneuver that lured the Persian center out of position, Alexander drove his cavalry directly at Darius a second time. And for the second time, Darius broke and fled the field, this time for good. The Persian Empire, the largest and most powerful the world had ever known, collapsed with him. Alexander marched into the ceremonial capital of Persepolis, and, in one of the most debated decisions of his life, burned its palace to the ground. Some say as calculated revenge for Persia's invasions of Greece generations earlier. Others say in a night of drunken excess he would later regret. Either way, the message was unmistakable. The empire that had once tried to conquer Greece was finished. Alexander, still only 25 years old, now controlled more territory than any single ruler in human history up to that point. And he wasn't finished. Most conquerors would have stopped there, satisfied with an empire stretching from Greece to Egypt to Persia. Alexander kept marching east, through modern-day Afghanistan, over mountain passes so brutal that soldiers froze to death in their sleep, and finally into India. At the Hydaspes River, now called Jhelum, he faced King Porus, whose army included something Alexander's men had never fought before: 200 war elephants. It was, by many historians' accounts, the hardest-fought battle of his entire career. He won, and then, in another surprising act, restored the defeated Porus to his throne as an ally rather than a prisoner, deeply impressed by his courage. But something had shifted. Alexander's army had now been fighting, marching, and bleeding for 8 straight years, thousands of miles from home. At the Hyphasis River, his soldiers finally refused to go any further. For the first time in his life, Alexander faced a wall he could not cut through with a sword. His own men saying no. He raged. He sulked in his tent for days, hoping they would change their minds. They didn't. Alexander, the man who had never lost a battle, was finally forced to turn back, not by any army on earth, but by the simple exhaustion of the men who loved him. The march back was even deadlier than the march out. Crossing the Gedrosian Desert, Alexander lost more soldiers to heat, thirst, and starvation than he had lost in nearly a decade of battle combined. He finally reached Babylon in 323 BC, exhausted, restless, and already planning his next campaign, this time toward Arabia. He never got the chance. After a night of heavy drinking and feasting, Alexander fell violently ill. Over the following days, his condition worsened rapidly. Fever, agonizing pain, an inability to speak. Historians still argue about the cause. Malaria, typhoid fever, even poison have all been proposed. No one has ever settled it for certain. On June 10th, 323 BC, Alexander the Great died in Babylon. He was 32 years old. When his generals begged him, in his final hours, to name a successor, he reportedly whispered a single haunting word: the strongest. It was, in hindsight, the one command his empire could never carry out. Within just a few years, his generals tore the empire apart between themselves, carving his conquests into rival kingdoms that would shape the map of the ancient world for centuries. In just 13 years, Alexander built an empire stretching over 2 million square miles from Greece to the edge of India, without ever losing a single major battle. He founded more than 20 cities that still exist today. He spread Greek language, art, and ideas across 3 continents so thoroughly that historians still call the centuries that followed the Hellenistic age in his honor. But strip away the myths, the god-king legends, the larger-than-life stories, and what remains is something almost more astonishing. A boy who simply refused to accept that anything was impossible. Not a wild horse, not an unsolvable knot, not the largest empire on earth. He once said he was not afraid of a large army, only of a man who did not know fear. He died at 32, having run out of world before he ran out of ambition. 2,300 years later, we're still asking the same question his own generals asked at his deathbed. Was there ever going to be anyone strong enough to follow him? History's answer so far has been no. There has only been one great warrior that the world admirably remembers today as Alexander the Great. If you liked the video, hit the like button. And for more such documentaries on history, mystery, stories, and literature, follow Meridian Docs.